Hello guys, welcome to another video. In this video, we are going to discuss about Docker. We will be discussing the differences between Dockerfile, Docker image, and Docker containers. We will see all the concepts with real-time examples and use cases as well. So let's begin the video. If you are preparing for Docker interview, make sure you watch this video so you will be able to understand all the differences between three important concepts in Docker. So let's begin the video. We'll be covering below points in this video about the Docker file, Docker image, and Docker container. We'll be seeing the key differences as well, along with the use cases and real world examples. Let's begin by understanding the Docker file. This is a text file. If you want to create a file, this is the first step inside the Docker. Okay, if you are learning Docker, you will have to learn the Docker file first. Okay, so let's understand it. This is just a text file which will contain all the instructions which you can write to build one Docker image. Suppose you are building a Docker image, you will have to write some of the commands. You can say you will have to write the instructions to build that image. That file is called Docker file. You'll have to create one text file with extension and not extension, you can say name as Docker file, and you'll have to save it and you'll have to write the instructions to build the image within it. Okay, this acts as a blueprint for creating images. Okay, this is one example of the Docker file. If you see it, this is a text file and you will have to write in this format. The first one is base image. Okay, this is you can see node 16 is the base image, and whenever you are building or writing one Docker file, you should be starting from one base image. Okay, if you are suppose doing it for node, you can use this image, or if you are just performing some simple Linux task, you can just take fresh ubuntu or basic ubuntu or some kind of image. Okay, after that you can perform all the operations whatever you want to do. Suppose you want to copy some files, you want to build Python web app, build Python package, you want to copy some files from your virtual machine or from your local to the image, you can perform all the operations within this Docker file. If you see inside it here, this is setting up the working directory. After that, this is copying this package.json file. Okay, and after that, this is installing the dependencies with this running this command npm install. Okay, once that is done, this is exporting the 3000 port and finally starting the application. So this way you can write all the instructions for your application within one file, and that file will be called as Docker file. Later you will use this file to build the Docker image. Okay, so in all these three, Docker file is the first step. You will have to create it before starting with Docker. Let's move ahead. The next one is Docker image. This is lightweight, standalone, and executable package. Okay, that is nothing but a package created using the Docker file. This contains code, runtime libraries, dependencies, and environment. Once you have built it, once you have created the Docker file, you can run this Docker build command, which will build your Docker file into the Docker image. You'll have to supply Docker build and your Docker file name so that Docker will go ahead and build your image with the instructions which you might have configured or which you might have written inside your Docker file. Okay, it will go ahead and build that package. So that can contain your code, that can be your runtime, it will have all the libraries and dependencies which needed to run your application, along with the environment that can be Linux. Mostly Docker runs on the Linux machines. Okay, this is immutable once built. You cannot change it once your Docker image is built. If you want to change it, you will have to go inside your Docker file again, make the change, and you will have to build the Docker image again. If you want to change, suppose your Docker image is built, and if you want to have change or something is wrong in that, if you want to make the change, you cannot directly go ahead and make the change in Docker image. You will have to uh, modify the Docker file, and again you will have to rebuild it. Okay, generally we use this Docker image to deploy our application across the environment consistently. Okay, now let's move to Docker containers. This is a runtime instance of a Docker image. Once you have created one instance from your Docker image, that is called a Docker container. This is a kind of process which runs inside your virtual machine, and your container is, you can say, is just that process. Okay, and your application will be running using that inside that container, whatever you might have created with this Docker image. This isolates app process in a virtual environment. You can run this command running a container with docker run -d -p. You can define the ports and your image name, so that using this image you will be able to spin up this Docker container directly using this port inside your machine and containers. Okay, so this is the basic difference between image, file, and containers. File is the first step where you write all the instructions for your Docker image, and after that you build that image with the Docker build command, and one image will be ready, and you can store that image somewhere in public repository like Docker Hub, and even in private repositories like Azure Container Registry. You can store your Docker images, and once the image is stored there, you can pull the image and you can spin up the containers with this Docker run command. Okay, and your container will be ready, and even your application will be running inside that container. This is the key difference between the Docker file, Docker image, and Docker container. Let's understand about it. The first feature is purpose. Generally, we create Docker file, and this is the blueprint to build the images. We write all the instructions inside the Docker file. In Docker images, this is just the executable package which is being built with the Docker file. And Docker container is running instance of the image. Once you have this image ready, you can use this same image to spin up the Docker container with Docker run command. And the format is text file for Docker file. The Docker image is binary package, and it will have all your code, libraries, dependencies, everything inside one single image. Okay, you don't have to do anything, just run this image and everything, all the binaries, dependencies will be uh, placed inside this container, and your running and your application will be running successfully. Okay, so this is nothing but running process inside the virtual machine, or that can be even the physical machine. Creation command for Docker file, there is no creation command because this is a text file with all the instructions. We just have to write one txt file, not txt Docker file, that the format is text file, and you will have to write the instructions. And for this Docker image, you will have to run this Docker build command, and you will have to supply the Docker file name. Then only your Docker image will be built. Okay, for Docker containers, you will have to spin up the containers with Docker run. You can supply all other things as well, like you can provide Docker container name, you can provide all the port details, along with the image name as well. Okay. The static is for Dockerfile, immutable for Docker images because you cannot change it once you have created the image, and this is dynamic for Docker containers. Let's finally discuss the use case as well. Generally, we create Dockerfile to build automation. You can automate everything. You can automate your application and uh, just build that to one image. For Docker image, we do it for environment packaging, and Docker container. We You can say use this for app deployment. These are some of the steps which we generally use from one Docker file to container. Okay, so this is one example to deploy one Python web app. So we have written the Docker file for that Python web app. You can see here Python 3.9 base image is being taken, where all the things will be there, like Python will be installed already because we are taking the base image as Python. We are setting the work directory as slash app. After that, we are building our application. We are copying the requirements.txt file and we are building the application. Once this is done, we are copying the we are copying all the files, and finally we are starting that Python application. So this is our Docker file, and all the Docker file inside your even in all the organization will be something like this. Okay, once you have written the Docker file, you can use this docker build -t and your image name to build the image. Okay, we have given dot here because your Docker file will be inside the current directory. If not in current directory, you'll have to supply the full path of your Docker file. Okay, once you have done it, your image will be built and you can push it to either your private repository and even in the Docker hub. Okay, with Docker push command. Once your image is there in some registry, you can either pull it with Docker pull command, or you can even directly run this command Docker run. You can specify all the ports, like which port on which port you want your application to run on, and finally the image name. Okay, if you are not specifying the full image name here, this will just go ahead and search in Docker hub. If your image is not found in Docker hub, it will fail. So make sure you are specifying the full image name if you are using the private repository, or you are using the this image directly in your pulling this image directly in your local before running this command. Okay, if you need more details about all these commands, I have already made videos about Docker. You can go ahead and watch that. And finally, once container is running, you can access your application on this port number and this local host URL, and your application will be accessible. So this is how we create one Docker file, we build the image, and we build the container using that image. Okay, so if you see, container is dependent on image, image is dependent on Docker file. So to create one image, you will have to first create the Docker file. To create one container, first you will have to build the image. So this is the step. Let's discuss the use cases. For Dockerfile, we use this to automate all the builds. You can build the images directly using this Dockerfile. Even you can create CI/CD pipelines. If you have Dockerfile ready, you can use the Docker command to automate creating the images and pushing that to your registry. Okay, we use Docker image to deploy your code, deploy your application consistently across the environment. Okay, so that your application will be running in every environment without any failure. Okay, for Docker container, we use it to run and scale all the apps. Okay, finally, the Docker file is blueprint for creating the images. Docker image is immutable environment package. You can use this to create the containers. And Docker container is running instance of an image. If you are creating the Docker container, you can directly access your application using that localhost URL and your port number. Okay, so if you are learning Docker, you will have to understand all these three important concepts of Docker: Docker file, Docker image, and Docker container. Okay, that's it from this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe my channel. If you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.